Unexplained objects in the sky have been a part of history ever since human beings began recording their experiences.
They're part of our popular culture. They say something about us.
Lights, angels, and monsters descending from above appear in virtually every society's folklore.
The UFO reports are not going away, they're actually increasing.
These fantastic objects have become inextricably linked with extraterrestrial life forms. And many theories have been created to explain their origin and purpose. By studying our own UFO stories, we may gain a better understanding of their true significance.
Just because Canada covers so much physical territory, I think we are in a unique situation. This may be our century for us of putting cases into the field which actually teach us something about the phenomena. And I think we have advanced our understanding of the phenomena a little based on these cases which hold up to close scrutiny.
Whether they're psychological or sociological or physical, they're real enough to matter.
The year was 1967, and the Air Desk, Canada's National UFO Investigation Unit, was flooded with reports of unidentified flying objects. Investigators were concerned and wanted to find out what was happening in our airspace.
1967 was the year where Canada started to walk its own walk with UFOs.
There were booms in business and industry. Maybe technology was finally coming into the fore. Maybe media were certainly driving some of the interest in space around the world. We were looking at the space race that was going on full thrust at the time. Again, we had all these elements that seemed to combine to create an audience in some ways receptive to the possibility of aliens really being out there.
And now, here's a special out-of-this-world free offer. This moon rocket kit. First, blast off. It separates in midair and lands 2 spacemen on a moon map.
Canada, as it was in the world even, was beginning to form its own policies and have its own strategy to do with UFOs.
This is an official civil defense broadcast. Enemy aircraft are over Canada and headed this way. Normal broadcasting has been discontinued until after this emergency has passed.
Many theories were investigated. They could have been explained as Russian aircraft, weather balloons, atmospheric anomalies, or extraterrestrial spaceships. But no clear explanation could encompass the many strange events.
1967 was a flap year around the world, and of course UFOs are a world phenomenon. But in 1967, science fiction was taking a larger role in the public's eye. I think opened the public's mind, and in some ways may have encouraged them to report such things and to consider such things as possible, whereas before it just wasn't in the mindset.
I have orders to send you on a special mission to the planet Earth. As usual, you will take a flying disc. You will take off from this point and land approximately here.
By the end of the 1960s, as we began to explore space, it seemed plausible that other more advanced civilizations may have been visiting our planet.
And the idea was that if this was going on, perhaps the whole topic was worthy of serious scientific study.
The Air Desk undertook 9 separate investigations of UFO sightings in 1967 in hopes of gathering hard evidence to determine exactly what people were seeing. Most worthy of study that year was an alleged UFO crash at Shag Harbor, Nova Scotia, where an unprecedented effort of cooperation took place between military, government, and civilian investigators. The small village of Shag Harbor is located in the southeast corner of Nova Scotia's rugged Atlantic coastline. Surrounded by wind-gnarled pine trees and granite outcrops, the town is populated by hard-working men and women, most of whom earn their living in the fishing industry. On the clear night of October 4th, 1967, strange lights were witnessed across the southeast section of the province, particularly in Shag Harbor. Among the many people who saw the lights that evening were Captain Pierre Charbonneau as he flew Air Canada Flight 305 from Halifax to Toronto, 12-year-old Daryl Dory, his sister and his mother as they stood on their front lawn in Mahone Bay, and Captain Leo Howard Mersey and his crew of 20 fishermen. Chris Stiles watched them float over Dartmouth Cove, and Wilfred Eisner, a professional photographer, managed to snap a 5-minute exposure that captured the lights overhead. All of these sightings occurred along Nova Scotia's coastline and were witnessed by dozens of people. Laurie Wickens and his 3 friends were driving along the highway into Shag Harbor when suddenly they saw lights hovering at a 45-degree angle over the sound. The lights descended towards the surface of the water until they were lost from view. Wickens and his friends pulled into a nearby parking lot. They watched a pale yellow light slowly drifting out to sea. Convinced that an airliner had crashed into Shag Harbor, Wickens called the nearest RCMP detachment from a phone booth. Mary Banks, another resident of Shag Harbor, also called to report that a large jet had crashed into the sound. RCMP officers and civilians quickly began arriving at the waterfront. After contacting the Coast Guard, many of them set out in their fishing boats to look for survivors. But instead of finding aircraft debris, the fishermen encountered a strange yellowish trail of foam. The foam was 3 to 4 inches thick and almost a mile long. Coast Guard crews arrived at the scene and searched the area. But they too could find no trace of a downed airplane. The next morning, a preliminary report was sent to Canadian Forces headquarters. After communicating with NORAD, the military was asked to conduct an underwater search as soon as possible. 7 Navy divers searched throughout the daylight hours until sundown of October 8, 1967. The following day, Maritime Command canceled the search effort, claiming nil results. But officials were quick to admit that the object that crashed into Shag Harbor could not be explained through conventional means.
With siren the blaring and flashing the red lights, from Shag Harbor sound were the headlines at night.
First of all, it was the location in 67 of the RCMP detachment that responded to the 7 reports of the lights crashing into Shag Harbor. First of all, you have to remember at the time that the Roswell incident had been forgotten in the public eye. Even UFO researchers of the day dismissed the possibility of crash scenarios.
There weren't that many cases in Canada prior to 1967 that you could point to and say, hey, this is worth looking into, so that when Shag Harbor did happen, I think the public attitude shifted away from flying saucers and little green men and B movies to the possibility that there might be something going on.
The true significance of the case, however, is that it is the world's only UFO crash scenario that is actually supported in that interpretation by government documents that are freely available and there was no controversy as to their origin or authenticity.
It was very visible. It was nothing that you could hide. It was something you had to pay attention to. They couldn't pretend that it didn't happen, it wasn't an event. It indeed had too many witnesses.
One of the most important UFO events of the 20th century, Shag Harbor, remains an open, unsolved investigation.
Very dramatically, it says situation report, unidentified flying object, which they circled 3 times, and they said send to defense minister for advisement.
But the sheer number of credible witnesses is a compelling enough reason to pursue the truth in this case.
Put into the context of everything else that was seen in 1967, suggests there was some space activity going on, and what really did happen. And I still want to know, and I am sure everybody would like to know, and I applaud those who are pursuing some of those cases.
The Air Desk, the Canadian investigation unit for such cases as Shag Harbor, tried its best to find a satisfactory explanation for UFO sightings. With mounting evidence that something unconventional was happening in the sky, military leaders began questioning whether they were best suited for the job. America was having its own struggles with the UFO question in 1967, and a government-appointed scientist would attempt to close the book on flying saucers permanently.
In the U.S., a different event was unfolding, what has become known as the Condon Committee. The United States Air Force undertook and tasked a contract to the University of Colorado to study the UFO phenomena.
A distinguished scientist, Edward Condon helped write the book on quantum mechanics and worked with the U.S. Army as assistant director of the Manhattan Project, the world's first atomic bomb.
And what they were hoping to find out is whether it was of scientific merit to continue to investigate and study the UFO phenomena.
Flying saucers? Oh, they keep coming in every once in a while, but we don't take them too seriously.
Oh, no?
They pretty much knew they were going to come up with a negative result long before the project had concluded.
Conclusions are usually the result of lack of comprehensive analysis.
Misinformation can be accidental, but disinformation is very, very purposeful.
He was known to be his own man and had been in a lot of political turmoil and had stood up against people like Richard Nixon. And many of the scientists were perplexed and very confused by his very strange attitude toward the subject of UFOs.
Earlier in his career, Condon spoke freely about sharing nuclear technology with other countries as a means to calm the global tensions of the Cold War. It prompted the House of Un-American Activities to label him as the weakest link in our atomic security. It was the most public attack on an individual during the McCarthy years.
Is this what the House Committee on Un-American Activities is really after? A silent, submissive, unprotesting America?
Many ufologists believe that Condon was coerced by the government to debunk UFOs.
Meanwhile, many of the scientists were trying to do very serious work, and he would haul them away from that and assign them to cases of low or no merit, such as Snippy the horse, one of the first animal mutilation cases. By 1969, they issued a final report, and Condon found, against the advice of many of those who served as investigators on the committee, that in fact there was nothing of merit to continue investigating the UFO phenomena.
It certainly put the United States Air Force in a position where they could say, there's nothing to this, Dr. Condon says there's nothing to this, therefore there's nothing to worry about it, therefore everybody can pack their bags and go home.
Unfortunately, with those recommendations, Project Blue Book was canceled, and officially the United States Air Force removed itself from investigating UFO, at least before the public eye.
since 1947, we have received and analyzed between 1,000 and 2,000 reports. It is this group of observations that we now are attempting to resolve.
But in Canada, military and government officials were committed to seeking a scientific answer to what was still an unsolved phenomenon.
In 1968, the responsibility for UFO investigations was removed from the Air Desk, and it was transferred to the National Research Council in Ottawa.
The National Research Council appointed scientists from the Hertzberg Institute for Astrophysics to study the issue and investigate every UFO report that crossed their desks.
So the National Research Council seized this opportunity of the UFO reports because they figured, hey, we can, try and get a hold of some meteorites. But the trouble is they were getting a lot of UFO reports that were obviously not meteors.
In documents, it claimed that there were setups that would allow these gentlemen to draw on field units as was necessary to conduct on-site investigations, RCMP staff, divers, military.
As Canadian agencies attempted to work together in order to deal with incursions into our airspace, they found it necessary to create a master plan of action.
The name of the plan is actually the Space Objects Contingency Plan, and it's a detailed 50-page document that lays out all procedures for the recovery of any space object. One of the things that many skeptics often put forward is how come some of these events that seem so real in Canada, perhaps they were super secret military devices or whatever. How do you know that the government wasn't simply giving out UFO explanations to cover up these events? When these things happen and the public is threatened or it's of great national importance to our security, that they tend to come clean, and we have one event at least that gives us some insight into that, and that was the re-entry of Cosmos 954.
On January 24th, 1978, Cosmos 954, a Soviet nuclear-powered surveillance satellite, crashed in the Northwest Territories, scattering a huge amount of debris over 60,000 square miles, stretching southward from Great Slave Lake into northern Alberta and Saskatchewan. According to the Canadian government, only 0.1% of the Cosmos radioactive power source was ever recovered.
The government told it as it was. There was no explanation of UFOs. There was no withholding from the Canadian public. Therefore, I don't see why in these other incidents they would use a UFO explanation to cover up a secret military event. When the public was threatened, our government has come clean. That's been the history.
Cosmos 954 is a classic case of retrieval, and it was a good example of science and military working together. The most important point about Cosmos 954 is that it does show us that if another crisis like that or another event similar to that occurs, that there is some readiness in anticipation.
Also on hand, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, doing their famous musical ride.
As one of the chief agents for the Space Objects Contingency Plan, Canada's National Police Force was often the first to arrive on the scene.
The legendary Mounties are the symbol of law and order in this vast domain.
In the United States, because there were layers of government and sheriffs and counties and states and so on and so forth, things got a little more complicated because you had to include FBI into the mix and the CIA. In Canada, there was one level to deal with in terms of UFOs being seen and reported. People would report UFOs to the RCMP.
They have a specific form, the HQ 400Q5 form, for RCMP reports. These reports deal with all aspects of the phenomena, sightings, encounters, mysterious things, landings.
To date, there are more than 15,000 RCMP UFO files in existence, stored in the National Archives of Canada.
When going through these files in the early 90s, I discovered 3 documents that broke slightly from the traditional HQ400 Q5 format. And what they were, as it turned out to be, was genuine X files. However, an X file officially doesn't even exist. The only problem was these papers I found out I knew were genuine, and they were about things that I knew were real, and I knew they were about people that had existed, written by people who had existed.
One of the RCMP's most spectacular UFO investigations again took place in Nova Scotia in the mid-70s, when the Sackville RCMP received a call from a couple claiming they were seeing unusual lights in the night sky. When Constable Ferrand drove out to the house, he was shocked to find that a huge object was indeed hovering over the neighborhood. Ferrand used a pair of field glasses to get a closer look at the UFO. He called the local Halifax airport to find out if the object was appearing on their radar. The control tower told him there was not a single aircraft anywhere nearby at the time, but they could see the lights as well. Ferrand was dumbfounded. He waited and watched with a group of neighbors as the craft hung in the sky for over 2 hours. The young RCMP officer put together a detailed report of what he had witnessed. Nearly 20 years later, UFO researcher Chris Stiles discovered the report in a government archive and decided to do some investigating of his own. Stiles was able to contact the neighbors of the couple who called the RCMP. They told him they had not seen anything that night because they had been hiding under their bed, frightened by the horrific screaming noises and lights coming from outside the house.
What you see is not necessarily what you get. Witness perception is being tampered with directly. The perception is being controlled by the UFO phenomena itself. What I came to consider after looking at the 1976 Sackville case was the possibility that it represented a part of the phenomena which is not very well known to the public, called reality transformation. Reality transformation is very important to our understanding of the phenomena, and it gives us a big new challenge that we have to deal with.
If the student reacts properly with 20 seconds of this, he is ready for the next step. Watch his eyes.
Good morning. My name's Chris Stiles, and I'm going to start just by welcoming you all to the UFO Halifax Symposium. You're going to hear everything here today. Sightings, encounters, abductions, all kinds of crazy stuff.
With the demise of a coordinated national approach to UFO research, amateur investigators have taken on the responsibility and effort involved in seeking answers. Individuals who passionately believe that UFOs are of great importance to us.
One, the evidence is overwhelming that planet Earth is being visited by intelligently controlled extraterrestrial spacecraft. In other words,
many have had their own UFO experiences and are inspired by a personal drive to find the truth.
And it moved across the sky over top, I would say maybe about 1,000 feet to 1,500 feet above me.
Chris Stiles, a witness to the Shag Harbor UFO incident in 1967, exemplifies the quality and dedication of modern UFO investigators.
Cape Sable Island, Shag Harbor.
As the lead civilian investigator of the Sackville RCMP case, Stiles began forming a radical theory about witness interactions with UFOs.
While the report and the officer and the witnesses that initially reported described the UFOs in great detail over the house, for example, there was no sound heard by them, yet the neighbors who did not come outside hear very loud sounds within their house, threatening sounds. What I came to consider was the possibility that it represented a part of the phenomenon which is not very well known to the public, called reality transformation.
Stiles was intrigued by a theory proposed by respected ufologist Jacques Vallée.
He put forward this concept, and basically what it is that reality transformation are cases where the main feature is controlled witness perception.
Vallée noticed that UFO witnesses often had experiences similar to those reported in paranormal events. RT, or reality transformation, is a term used for UFO and paranormal events featuring controlled witness perception, near-death experiences, religious miracles, out-of-body experiences, or close contact with unknown alien entities.
It can contribute nothing but confusion in an area already very much disturbed.
Stiles took Vallée's theories one step further.
There may in fact be two types of reality transformation. RT1 is basically people perceive the same thing, whether it's real or projected or interfered with or whatever.
What did you see here, Charles? Well, I was coming home from my music lesson and I saw these two objects floating down over this field. So my first instinct was to run up to them.
Were they colorful objects?
Well, the body was a glowing white, soft light, and it had red, blue, and green flickering lights on it.
Do you believe in flying objects now?
Yes, quite. I mean, I really did see it, and I touched it, and it was there. You know, it was there.
The second type, RT2, is the problem. The RT2 type is what I call the inconsistent type, and every witness may perceive the event differently. I believe this may even account for some traditional events before the modern UFO age, such as the miracle at Fatima, Portugal.
In the small town of Fatima, 3 children saw what they claimed was the Blessed Virgin Mary 6 times over the course of 5 months. On October 13th, 1917, close to 70,000 people gathered to witness the miracle. Even skeptical soldiers stationed to protect the crowd were forced to admit that a miracle was indeed happening.
But again, some saw the Virgin, some saw lights, some heard a voice, some saw nothing. The witnesses hear and see different information, and their memories are different. It's very challenging because it eliminates the possibility of corroboration.
Where reality transformation involves the manipulation of our minds by UFOs, another, more sinister aspect of the phenomenon began to emerge in North America during the 1970s.
The two of you are beginning a strange journey, a journey that no Earth people have ever undertaken before.
Abductees claim to have gone through horrible ordeals while on board extraterrestrial spacecraft. Betty and Barney Hill from Portsmouth, New Hampshire, were the first to announce that they had been abducted by aliens. Thousands more would soon follow in their footsteps.
When the car motor stalled, they came up. The 2 groups took us out of the car to a path in the woods to where the craft was on the ground. They just told us, don't be afraid, we're not going to harm you. We just want to do some simple tests. Their facial features are a little different from ours. Their eyes are larger, nose smaller. No lips, no protruding part of the ear, and no hair. So they did some simple testing, and when my exam was over with, the examiner went into Barney's room.
The stories are virtually the same all over the world. They are taken aboard this thing, whatever, that has round rooms, soft light, strange-looking people, about 4 or 5 feet tall, gray skin, large eyes, bald, this kind of thing. And what they do is they set them up on this table and go through a medical examination.
Sounds like a collection of little CBC executives.
Doesn't it?
Way off up in some, place in the sky.
The fascination North Americans held for weird UFO encounters eclipsed any serious thinking about what the phenomenon really meant.
We wish you only good.
UFOs, I've always paid attention to it because there's obviously something going on there. There's just too much noise happening for there to be nothing going on. But the one thing I'm reasonably sure isn't going on is alien civilizations contacting us. The story just never made any sense to me. If somebody's going to come all this way, they'd have conned us out of something by now, or stolen something, or something other than giving people rectal probes and then not even charging for them. The story never made any sense to me. What are they getting out of this?
I look at these people who have been doing research into UFOs for the last 50, 60 years and think what a horror show it would be if it turned out to be something really monstrous and ugly, which would mean just all kinds of calamity for us eventually.
While the abduction phenomena was taking off in America, a little-known Canadian case may have been the result of a victim's own desire to be taken.
Granger Taylor was a big fan of UFOs, built his own little UFO in the backyard, and his family knew that, here's a guy, if there was anyone who was going to be taken by the aliens, it would be him. And he predicted that he would be, and sure enough, one day he vanished without a trace, and his family still to this day has no idea what happened to him.
The Granger Taylor flying saucer rests on stilts in the backyard of the Taylor home on Vancouver Island. He built his spaceship out of 2 satellite dishes and outfitted it with a television, a couch, and a wood-burning stove. He was obsessed with finding out how flying saucers worked, spending hours sitting in his ship thinking about alien life forms. Then, one November night in 1980, Granger Taylor simply disappeared. He left a note for his parents, which read, "Dear Mother and Father, I have gone away to walk aboard an alien ship. Recurring dreams assure me of a 42-month interstellar voyage to explore the universe." Granger had told a friend before he disappeared that he was in mental contact with someone from another galaxy. On the night that he disappeared, a storm struck Vancouver Island. Hurricane winds were reported, and electrical power was knocked out. After 4 years of exhaustive checks of hospital, passport, employment, and vehicle records, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police have not found any clues as to the whereabouts of Granger Taylor. The 42 months ended in May 1984. His parents still wait for their son's return. "I can hardly believe Granger's off in a spaceship," his father said. "But if there is a flying saucer out there, he's the one to find it."
We're ready. It's time. Just get us off this ball of mud. Why should we be limited to this one little speck of dirt? It just doesn't make sense. Look at how much is out there, for Christ's sake.
By the end of the 1980s, technological advancements were occurring on a daily basis. Our society was run on a clockwork system of machines and automation that required scientific facts. The notion of alien intelligences did not mesh with our new worldview.
Maybe it really wouldn't change the way they live their lives if aliens are really there. In some cases, and certainly in some circles, the possibility of aliens being real would radically alter their worldview, and I can see it being very, very disruptive.
They're pulling us up.
There were people, however, who did use the phenomenon to manipulate others.
You get this beautiful-looking guy, and beautiful girls come to you and talk to you about space brothers and UFOs, and people can get sucked in.
Cults played on the fears of the weak and the lonely by reviving the modern myth of UFOs to fulfill their fantasies of power and domination.
Charisma, leadership, power. And look at the Third Reich and Hitler and Germany, and, you know, and the events that led up to the Second World War. That was a cult, with this heroic leader, someone not to be questioned, you know. That's exactly what a cult is, you know. I mean, a bunch of loonies running around.
We don't believe that our Father's kingdom has much need for these flesh bodies, but it's possible that a spacecraft will come down and we'll walk on board that craft, and they'll take these bodies from us and issue us the ones that belong to that level so that we might begin service.
These groups, like many before them, realized that the fear of an alien intelligence that cannot be seen can have a powerful influence over people.
If you got to go that far to get your fear, you ain't getting enough worrying done. You know, you're not being bright enough. You're not thinking clearly because you're gonna die. You know. Well, what the hell else you got to be afraid of?
Cult leaders equate UFOs as religious icons. But UFOs have been part of religious expression since the first cavemen etched heavenly invaders of their own. Whether it's a god, an angel, or messengers from above, entities descending from the heavens have been a part of every culture's religion.
Partly when God went and died, it left a void. You know, we'd like somebody to explain how we got here, and someone we can go send a message saying, what was this all about? Excuse me, what are we supposed to do now? It used to be very simple. You just went and you looked it up in a book, you know, and now we're going to have to work it out for ourselves.
Hallelujah. Hallelujah, Houston.
Today, religion has taken a back seat to the age of technological empowerment, widening the gap between ourselves and our perceived gods.
There was perhaps a rejection of traditional theology, so people replaced it with a scientific theology. And more nuts and bolts flying saucer is easier to believe for some people than a spiritual being which exists on a cloud somewhere.
We can now use our technology to aid us in our quest for an answer. The search for extraterrestrial intelligence, or SETI, uses a gigantic receiving antenna that probes the depths of space, listening for signals from intelligent life forms.
These inventions will make the weakened voice signals come in strong and clear, even after their long journey through space.
Well, it looks like all the hard work was really worth it.
So far, SETI has not been successful. But perhaps ET has ways of communicating with us. In Canada, as well as the rest of the world, major UFO events occur regularly.
If you see something in the sky, if you see something land in your backfield, if you see something hover over your house, your self-preservation instinct is to describe it as something you can relate to. It could be an angel, could be a fairy, whatever it is. If you don't want to know about it, if it's not something that you're ready for, then you're going to back away from it.
Theories arising from cases such as Sackville could mean that our entire belief system is flawed, and there is much more to the phenomenon than previously thought.
I believe there's a phenomena. I believe there's things beyond conventional understanding, but I don't know that these guys are from Zeta Reticuli or Alpha Centauri or anywhere. I don't even know that there are any guys. But what I do know is there is some kind of intelligent directed phenomena, and we don't have a handle on it.
Whether we ignore them or not, UFOs are here to stay. Sightings in Canada and the rest of the world increase every year.
We've noticed some recent trends. For example, over the past 5 years, the numbers of UFO reports have been increasing at a fairly significant rate, in some cases 200 or 300% over this short span of time. And this flies in the face of people who are saying, oh, well, the UFOs are gone, people aren't paying attention to them anymore, and they don't matter. But people still report UFOs.
One of the most spectacular UFO events of the mid-1990s occurred along the Klondike Highway in Canada's Yukon Territory. The first witness to the Yukon UFO was driving along the highway when he noticed a large row of lights passing overhead. Scrambling out of his car for a better look, he felt a hot beam of light envelop his body. Further down the road, another driver watched as the UFO held its victim paralyzed. The object began to drift away. It was larger than a football field and emanated colored beams of light. It made no sound, but seemed to be under some sort of intelligent control. A fur trader, out tending his trapline, was startled to see the silent object drifting over a hill. When he pointed his flashlight at the UFO, it raced towards him, as if in response. The emanating beams of light acted as if they were operated intelligently. A central beam swept across the snow below, and the object was so large that the man was forced to turn his head from side to side in order to take it all in. This proved to be too much for the fur trader, and when he tried to steal a final look at the UFO, it had disappeared. There were many witnesses to the Yukon UFO, and their testimonies and descriptions of the object are surprisingly similar. They each agreed that the object seen that night was very much out of the ordinary, with the possible exception of some children who were convinced that the UFO was Santa Claus testing his new sleigh.
There was a report of 15 objects. Flying triangles were reported over New York, Illinois, and California. Again, light was seen in New Jersey. 3 flashing objects flew out into space over Michigan. All of those objects seen during the recent lunar eclipse. People ask me how it is that I managed to keep going. And I say to them, you know, whether I like it or not, this is my assignment. If I'm not going to do it, then who is? And somebody has to.
They can perhaps be steered. So it's difficult to get an overview of ufology from just one individual. That's why it's important to get a lot of different commentary from individuals who believe that the aliens really are here, from those who believe that the government is really covering up, that abductees are really stating the facts. It's only through looking at the gestalt of ufology that one is able to get a better perspective on what's going on without taking sides, because there is such passion invoked in ufology.
I'm happy to see the whole shift and focus is changing to a point of acceptance at a social level where people can come forward and say, this is what I saw, this is what I experienced, I have no explanation for it, do you have any answers?
Because clearly, if Roswell was real, then that proves that Earth is being visited, it proves the government's known about it, it proves that aliens aren't perfect.
Modern UFO investigators have now at their fingertips tools and technologies undreamed of in the past. But more importantly, they have a driving desire to reveal once and for all the truth behind UFOs. Our Canadian UFO experience is an important aspect of this truth, and it may help us understand our place in the universe.
Could it be that UFOs represent alien technology that penetrates our skies and defense systems? Could it be that UFOs are, in fact, a reflection of ourself in terms of our interpretation of some mysterious natural phenomena? We do not know what ET will be like. But what we do know is that UFOs have made an impression upon us. They're part of our popular culture, but at the same time, they say something about us, our place, our sense of what we are in the universe.
To the young people of your world,
I don't think it's important whether the answer comes from whispers from the stars or from the UFO data. The important thing is, can we answer the question definitively to our harshest critics that we are not alone? And if we're wrong, if we're all wrong, us and the skeptics, and we are in fact alone, how much more precious must human life be, and how much better we should treat one another in this age?
Oh, thumbs up, definitely, definitely. Nothing's going to stop the human race. We will continue to have our setbacks, and some of them may be striking, but the evidence is clear. Nothing's going to stop us. One day we are going to own the whole universe. It may take us a while, but there's absolutely no question in my mind. All of observable reality is our playground, and sooner or later we're going to go out there and take a look at it.
Everything I saw was out of this world.